It has been a very exciting week here at TFL Truck because of an all-new all-electric pickup.
That's right, yeah, so we had a chance to spend a week with the first commercially available electric EV truck on the market, the Rivian R1T.
Yep, so on this episode of TFL Talking Trucks, Tommy and I want to dig down and tell you guys everything about what it's like to actually live within Rivian R1T for a few days, and we've put it to the test.
We absolutely did, yes. We are going to talk about the pros, the cons, talk about the truck itself, what the build quality is like, the features, the gadgets, the gizmos, all of it. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll have a good idea of what the Rivian is all about.
Yeah, because we also have charged it. We're taking it off-road. You already drag raced it, right? And we have something else special coming up very, very soon on TFL Truck, which is an Ike Gauntlet.
Absolutely, very true. So let's get right to it now. First of all, we have a couple of ways to listen to the podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, I do apologize for my weird hat.
What's up with your hat?
I'm not going full hipster on you, Andre, but it's like 5 degrees outside and it's just an ice field in Boulder, Colorado today.
If you're watching this on YouTube and not listening to us directly on Apple Podcasts or other podcast platforms, I have a warm cup of coffee because I am also warming up. Yes.
Yeah, so, Andre spent all day off-road in the Rivian today as well.
Yeah, because we wanted to take it in the snow, in the ice. We did that. And also, I want to take this moment to thank our Patreon supporters before we dig further. Patreon.com/TFLCar. You guys continue to support us every single day. We have Dave Hershey with a big donation, and Matthew Elaine. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And Daniel Cooker. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that again.
But a huge thank you to the Patreon supporters. So if you notice, our podcasts are not riddled with ads, and that is in part because of our Patreon folks. So be sure to check out our Patreon page if you want to help out the team and help keep independent and honest reviews flowing.
Yes. So let's dig into it. So Rivian actually dropped off the pickup truck, the R1T, with us, and they brought, one of their original engineers. So we were able to ask a lot of questions and kind of get to know the vehicle. And then we took it on a multi-day and hundreds of mile test.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, big thank you to Brian, who came out here. It was really great to meet you. He was employee number 4 at, I think he was 4, or was he 8?
4. He's at 4.
4 at,
which is a big deal.
Yeah, at Rivian, even before it was called Rivian, when they were located in Florida, which was very cool.
Yeah, and also, of course, the PR people and also the team and Shaheen. So thank you very much. And also, we learned a lot about it, but then we quickly sprung into action. First of all, the truck by itself just kind of looks impressive. I mean, it looks very... this is an earlier build. Actually, the truck belongs to Chad, one of the employees at Rivian.
So what happened was they had a specific marketing PR truck, which they had shipped out to Denver.
Yes.
And then they were backing it off the delivery truck.
Yes.
And the driver apparently had an accident with it.
Right. The delivery driver, I'm assuming, hit the front end of that vehicle.
But this was such a cool thing. Day of, they scrambled. They had an employee at the center in Denver who's like, yeah, they can take my truck. So big thank you to not only Rivian, but to Chad for making this happen, because without him, none of this would be possible because of that incident with the marketing truck. So very cool stuff. It's also cool, though, because we know that this vehicle was not, tampered with ahead of time. It wasn't
right. It was a last-minute kind of stand-up.
Yeah, but it wasn't like tweaked for the media or like improved. This just happened to be the customer's truck. And keep in mind, the first customers of these Rivians have been employees. Yeah. So it's a cool thing that we got our hands on one whatsoever.
Exactly. And this is a launch edition. It's kind of a dark gray exterior color, and it's kind of a dark interior as well. And I think what struck me at first is just kind of, it looks like a completely, nice, high-quality vehicle. It's because it's a launch edition. It is a little bit pricey, right? And it starts at about what 72, 73, and the one we have here is about 77,000. That's maybe 2 years ago. That was a lot of money, but these days, 77 grand. almost an F-150 Lariat costs that much.
Well, let's talk about the Lightning we just placed our order for.
Yeah.
How much was that trim that you spec'd?
So we actually pre-ordered and ordered a F-150 Lightning. We decided to go with a Lariat edition with an extended battery range. And because of that, because we chose the Lariat, which is not the top level of the F-150 Lightning, and because we wanted a longer range battery and a couple of other features, that was $80,000.
80 grand.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the Rivian website, you've got two kind of basic build and configurations right away. There's the Explore Pack, which according to the website starts at $67,500, and then jump up to the Adventure Pack, starts at $73,000. And I think you're right, Andre. I mean, go back a few years ago and paying 73 grand for a truck would be unheard of.
Yeah.
But we're living in a time where Jeep Gladiators can
Crazy
be
time, yeah.
into the $60,000 range. We've got Tacomas well into the 50s, especially with dealer markups and after dealer markups. We can touch 60 grand in some cases. I mean, this is an expensive time to be a truck consumer. We're even seeing trucks now hit the 100 grand plus mark.
Exactly. And actually, cars are hitting up there as well, but especially pickup trucks, especially four-wheel drive vehicles.
So what do you think of the size of the vehicle? And this is where things get a little bit murky, because if you look at like the current trucks on the market, and if you look at throughout history, you've always had like the quarter-ton trucks, the half-ton trucks, the three-quarter, the one-ton, and there's always been these nice little dainty segments where you could see what the vehicles compete with on a size standpoint. But the Rivian kind of breaks those molds a little bit.
It does, and so it's bigger than Tacoma for sure. So Tacoma represents the mid-size segment, right? Traditional mid-size segment. You also have the Chevy Colorado, the Ford Ranger, and some others in that segment. The Rivian R1T is a little bit larger. It only comes in one configuration as far as size. It's got a crew cab, 4 doors, about a 4'7" approximately bed, right? And about 135-inch wheelbase, which does not make it a full-size truck. Actually, it's a little bit smaller than the F-150. It's a little bit smaller than the Toyota Tundra, for example. So it cuts in the middle. And we asked the Rivian, engineers, how come? And so the interesting answer that we got was that they wanted to build the cabin of this pickup for 5 people comfortably.
Yeah.
And then kind of keep the proportions of the truck not super long, so it would be good off-road, but as compact as possible. So this is what they ended up with.
It's kind of an interesting idea, I think, right? Not base it based on the class, but base it based on the
just kind of the use case.
Yeah, so if I'm on the Ford website right now because I want to kind of compare it to like an F-150. So if we look at the Super Crew, 5.5 foot, and they still say style side. So you're looking at 231.7 inches in total length. The Rivian's about 217, right? But a Ranger is going to be smaller than that. It's going to be like somewhere around 210 inches.
Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood.
Off the top of my head, somewhere around there.
Exactly. So it's cuts between them. And yeah, you might say the bed is too short. But as we found out, yes, part of the answer is yes, but also they have a unique tailgate that can extend that bed floor quite significantly. Yeah,
it's a very cool idea. Yeah. So what we did to test the usability of the bed is we do this test where we bring trucks to our buddy David Morrow's basically ranch.
Yes.
So he has a bunch of yaks up there, and he's got a fully
Happy Yak
ranch. He's got a fully functioning ranch, and this guy's incredible. Like, he's super talented. He's built home after home by hand. He's got this giant wood cabin he built all by hand. He builds his own furniture, and just like one of
trailers. He builds trailers.
Incredibly handy guys. But when it comes to his truck use, like every truck he owns as an 8-foot bed, I think he just happened to buy a parts truck, which had like a 6.5 foot, and that was like a big deal. But every truck he's owned for a long time, he drives the beans out of, and they're all 8-foot beds. So when we showed up with this 4.5 foot electric vehicle,
what was he saying?
He was actually pretty over the moon about it. He's got a really open mind, and he was really excited. Now, initially, we were measuring the bed because we were going to do some stuff with it to test out its payload capacity, and we're like, ooh, 4.5 feet. Not fantastic. But like Andre said, when you put the tailgate down, you get a full 7 feet from the bulkhead to the edge of the tailgate.
Okay, and it's a unique kind of a gooseneck hinge design, so it kind of extends the tailgate out.
It's funky, yeah. So like on a typical tailgate, you just have a simple simple hinge mechanism on the bedpost.
Yeah.
Right? Little rotating thing pops down. On the Rivian, you have a gooseneck hinge that kind of extends out by the bumper. So it's down low, it's on the horizontal plane, and it basically bows outward.
Yes.
So what that means is that the tailgate extends a huge amount compared to a traditional pickup. Now, some interesting things that David brought up, which I do have to agree with, I'm a little bit concerned about. If you look at the design, right, there's this little flap that covers that big gap between the tailgate and the bed.
Yeah.
And then when you lift open the flap, which can easily happen, or if you're loading up logs like we were, bark got down into the holes. Hay will get down into the holes there where the hinges are, gravel. But the issue that we were finding is that the hinge is basically encased by what appeared to be like the bumper trim or some kind of rear end trim.
So it couldn't fall through.
So it couldn't fall through. And David's concern, I think this is a real concern, if you are using it even as like a hobby truck and you're loading stuff in year after year after year, stuff is going to get into this gap between the bed floor and the hinge, and we're worried it's going to build up and clog stuff up.
Yeah, and maybe prevent the hinge from working eventually.
Yeah.
Potentially. But still, nonetheless, that video from the ranch is coming. So if it's not published already, it will be very soon when you're listening to this and watching this. So I'm really excited because you guys carried almost the maximum payload, correct? What, about 1,000 pounds, 1,200 pounds?
Higher.
1,400 pounds?
I think, Andre, it's fair to say officially we were at the maximum payload. Unofficially, may have been a little over.
Okay, did you break the scales?
Well, we went out to the scales, and we've got the scales that we use for all the tests, and unfortunately, the scales were down that day. They weren't reading properly, so we couldn't get a fair, accurate representation. But David does this practically for a living, moving these logs when he's building homes and stuff. Yeah, and he's like, this is a lot of weight.
Yeah, and we did a very similar test with the Ford Maverick, maybe with a little bit less weight, right? We've got to talk about capability because you might be wondering, is this a real pickup truck, right? So the capability stated by Rivian itself is maximum payload is about 1,760 pounds, I believe, in that neighborhood. Our truck, this launch edition, has a lower payload because it has some optional equipment, right?
Yep.
And it also has the adventure pack with all-terrain tires. So the payload sticker on our truck says, I believe, about 1,419 pounds, which is still comparable to a half ton.
And I was talking to Shaheen about this last night because he was wondering where I was getting this number from. Because officially, the number they tout is the 1,764. But the sticker, which is, the official
in the door
government mandated sticker, right, is showing 1,419. So I think what could be happening, and he's going to get some more clarification on this, is that when you load any vehicle up with options, right, that decreases the payload.
That makes sense. Because your gross vehicle weight stays the same,
yeah,
and you're adding more options to it, and so you're decreasing the payload.
Like Ford, on their F-150, they advertise like some huge number.
3,000 pounds. You're right, but it's hard. It's a very specific configuration.
Two-wheel drive, short bed, no
with
options.
Special suspension, right?
And realistically, an F-150 Super Crew 5.5 bed is going to have like 1,400.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no short bed two-wheel drive version of the Rivian, but I think that's what's going on here, where certain options could play into that. But what do you think of that payload number? Let's just round it to like 1,500. Is that a lot of payload?
It is, in my mind. I think it's really usable. That means you can bring about 4 people. Let's say you can carry stuff in the bed, maybe towing a trailer. They rate it at 11,000 pounds of towing.
Wow.
So technically, if you're towing 11,000, let's say maximum load, you're probably pushing on the truck with about 10% of that, which is 1,100. So you don't have much left. But it's typical for a full-size truck. So I'm pretty happy with the specs they had. We haven't towed yet as of this taping, as of this recording.
Yeah, that's tomorrow's
job. So
job.
that's tomorrow. So that's coming up very soon on TFL Truck. And of course, you're probably wondering about range, right? Range. How is it going to do?
So officially, if I go to the Rivian website here,
well, EPA has a rating.
314 miles.
Yes. And do you know what I realized?
What did you realize?
So the gross vehicle weight rating on the Rivian R1T is over 8,500 pounds.
Okay, what does that mean?
Which means it puts it in the heavy-duty truck category, actually. So it's above, like the Titan XD, in a very similar category, for example. You have like the Chevy 2500 is in a similar category. So technically, they're not required to state their efficiencies.
So let me get this straight, right? So if I go out and buy like a Ford F-250
Yes.
or Ram 2500 or any of the HD trucks, I look at the window sticker and there is no fuel economy numbers.
Right. There's no government doesn't rate them.
Yeah,
right,
because the government doesn't rate them. Now, talk to me about how that translates to the electric pickup world. Does the government still have to rate EPA range? How does that work?
Well, I think, first of all, the manufacturers and the government work together, right? The manufacturer usually submits data and they say, we think the truck is going to do this. And the government agency, in this case, EPA, confirms it, right? Or denies it. So, and they work together. So in this case, I believe it looks like Rivian didn't really have to rate it officially, but they did. And I think that's really great. And that rating is 314 miles of range.
Now, officially, right, if you're in the gas or diesel truck world, right, and you are Ram who's developing the new 3500 6.4, you could probably go to the EPA and be like, I want to rate this truck for MPG.
Yeah,
I mean, they're welcome to, but they have no incentive to do so.
Well, it costs money.
Yeah, it costs money, and the numbers are going to be so low, right? So it's an interesting exemption that exists where HD trucks are
not rated.
Yeah.
And the main reason why HD trucks are not rated so far is because there's so many variations, right? You can have an HD truck with no bed, right? For example, you can have a work bed on it. You can have a ladder rack. You can have a box truck. You can have a million different configurations. So manufacturers, for that reason, don't rate them because it wouldn't be realistic in a way because there's so many configurations of heavy duties. But the Rivian only comes in a couple of different configs with eventually several batteries, right? Right now, there's basically one battery available.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at the fueleconomy.gov, which is the EPA website, right, we see the total range is estimated to be 314 miles, 314, with a 70 MPGe combined, 74 city, 66 highway. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is, if you look at the Rivian website, there are some kind of caveats there. So it says delivering an EPA estimated 314 miles of range when paired with the 21-inch wheels. For 20-inch wheels, our estimates show a range reduction of 10 to 15%.
Yes, so and I think they're referring to also some of the more aggressive tires you can get.
Yeah, so the 20-inch wheel, right, comes in that Pirelli all-terrain tire.
Yeah, which is a really kind of a beefy tire, which we used actually off-roading, which we'll talk about next. So that kind of makes sense. A heavier tire, a bigger tire will decrease your range. Also, if the vehicle becomes heavier, right, if you add more options to it, technically the efficiency will go down because you're heavier, basically.
Right. Yeah, but so we're going to do a lot more range testing. This is only day 2 we've had the truck. And then, of course, the next episode we'll update you on that. Now, so figure 314, right? Or with our wheel tire package, somewhere in like the 280 something.
280-ish, yeah.
Yeah, 280 range. I think that's very usable for everyday commuting, everyday driving around.
Yeah.
People buy electric cars and electric trucks based on the road trips they never take, which is that, 1% of the time you're actually driving across state lines. But for most people, if you have a place to plug this in at home, at your ranch, in your pole barn,
at your work office,
this is plenty of range because most folks aren't driving anywhere near even 100 or 200 miles, let alone 300 miles in a single day. So I think that that's a pretty cool idea. One thing that is worth noting, though, and this is kind of an unofficial number, but they were hinting at this when we were talking to them, is the battery capacity estimated to be somewhere around 135 kilowatt hours.
Right.
Right. So it's made up of, I think they said 9 15 kilowatt hour modules.
Little modules, and they have special cooling packs as well.
Now that is a positively enormous battery pack.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge. Consider like the biggest Tesla pack you can buy right now is 100 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, this is above that.
This is enormous.
By 35%.
And I guess I didn't realize what that meant from an electricity standpoint until you go ahead and plug it in at home.
Yeah.
So this is not a vehicle that's even worth trying to plug in at 110 volts.
No, and actually Rivian guys were saying you will not gain much range, period.
If anything, yeah. Just running the truck stationary and keeping it, juiced up.
So level 2, you really have to have level 2.
Now, both of our level 2s, and I think this is pretty common among households, are 40 amps.
Yes.
So there's like 32 amps, 40, and then some places have 48 amps as well. But 40 is kind of a very typical number.
Standard house, yeah.
So drove it home, plugged it in at about 56% on our 40 amp circuit, and right around 9 kilowatts, which is the charge rate. It was estimating somewhere around 10 hours till full.
So from 56%.
From 56%.
Yeah.
So if you bring that puppy all the way down to zero,
It's going to take a day
on
or
40
more.
amps, 240 volts,
Yeah.
you're going to be looking at 20 plus hours, which is a long time.
So you would, if you're doing that, especially on a road trip, you would need a fast charger.
Of course.
A DC fast charger, which we've also done a test. What is it, 20 to 80% you did?
Yeah, so I did 20 to 80%. I'm trying to kind of develop a standard. So as we move forward, of course, I do want to become, more relevant and more authoritative in actual hard EV numbers. So the typical truck car buyer probably won't care, but there's a small number of like really EV enthusiasts who will care.
Yeah.
Now, Rivian's official quote is 140 miles of range in 20 minutes.
Yep.
So I did exactly 20% to exactly 80% at a 350 kilowatt fast charger. Now, the reason I had to find a 350 is because Rivian claims charging output of over 200.
So you wanted to maximize it, right?
Yeah, initially, and 300 in the future. The tricky thing is we have a lot of Electrify America stations here, EVgo, ChargePoint, that kind of thing, but they're all pretty much 50 to 150. It's really hard to find a 350. So I ended up doing the test up in Loveland, Colorado last night, and 20 to 80%. I'll have a video over at TFL EV kind of explaining all this and the testing procedure. It took me right around, let me get the exact number, go to my Google Sheet here. It took me, 41 minutes.
41, okay.
And my peak charge rate during that was 151. That's the highest number I recorded. So we aren't quite at that 200, which they're claiming peak, right? And then, of course, that number tapered down dramatically as we reached 80%.
So how did you know it was a 350 kilowatt charger? I mean, does it state somewhere?
It's labeled.
It's labeled.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Electrify America not only labels the actual post, but if you go on the app, you can see exactly what the station offers and who is using what charger. So 41 minutes from 20 to 80%. So we put roughly 60% in the battery, which equates to somewhere around 150 miles, right? Give or take. That's not incredible.
No, but it's real world.
It's real world.
Yeah.
And of course, that's going to change depending on outside temperature. It's going to change depending on the pack temperature. And, they don't tell you a lot of like that pack temperature data. I asked them, is there any preconditioning of the battery you need to do in order to get the fastest charge? The engineer said, nope, just plug it in. So those were my personal experiences. And hopefully, going down the road, I'd like to get this truck back and do some like longer road trips with it because we only have it for a few days and get kind of a better sense of what it's like to road trip.
Yeah, so 40 minutes, I mean, technically it's kind of a lunch. You can have lunch, in 40 minutes. But if you're on the road trip, it starts to take some time, basically.
I did. I got chicken, and I was frantically eating my chicken in between writing down data. It was quite...
There you go. So if you're wondering, like, okay, they say 11,000 pounds of towing, what does that mean in the real world? Well, we'll give you that data. We're going to not only do the iGauntlet, we'll also do a long-range towing test as well on flat ground, so you can relate to those numbers, and we'll give you all of that information very soon. But then there is also the power. This truck has a lot of horsepower.
How is this is kind of an interesting kind of conversation, Andre. How is the platform laid out, and where does the power go to?
Yeah, so it's all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, but it's very unique because it has 4 motors, quad motor setup. And I spoke with several different engineers at Rivian over the years because we followed their development. And they wanted this truck to also be off-road capable, so they wanted suspension travel. And they decided not to put these motors inside the hub, right? Because that's not a solution you can have. You can have an electric motor inside the wheel hub, and so it's completely independent, but there's some issues you have to overcome, like weight, for example. So they put their motors as inboard as possible. So imagine the center line of the vehicle, and there are 2 motors in the front and 2 in the back. And we asked them, are they identical? They said yes. Technically, the rear motors are a little bit more, they tuned it so the rear motors get a little bit more power than the fronts, just to naturally kind of balance the vehicle. But the total power is 835 horsepower if it's fully charged, and 906 pound-feet of torque. And also, that's huge numbers. That's way over any other production pickup currently, other than the Hummer that delivered a few trucks, right? The GMC Hummer EV. So those are really huge numbers, and that means they can control each motor separately. So in theory, let's say 3 of the wheels lose traction. Well, there's still the 4th wheel that can spin, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully get you out. And I can talk about my off-road experience in a second.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a lot of power. You took with drag racing.
I did, yeah. So I did do a bunch of racing with my dad on our little track. Now, unfortunately, it's the middle of January, so we couldn't use our quarter mile because it's
snowed in.
It's not happening right now, yeah. So I'd like to get the vehicle back once again in the spring or in the summer so we can really get some hard data. But we did use our calibrated GPS-based performance timers to validate 0 to 60 times, and the quickest time I got was 3.6, which is pretty phenomenal.
For a 7,000-pound vehicle, yes.
Yeah, 3.6 seconds from 0 to 60. On that same day and the same surface, we ran a Model Y at 3.9. So even quicker than the Model Y. Now, the Model Y was on the special all-weather tires.
Model Y Performance.
Yep. The Rivian was on all-terrain tires, so neither were on ideal tires. And I'm sure in a perfect lab environment with a stickier situation, you could get both quicker. But 3.5 seconds makes this one of the quickest vehicles I have ever driven, period, let alone a truck. Now, to achieve those speeds, you do have to change the drive mode. So there's a few different drive modes. You have to put it in sport, and that automatically lowers the suspension. Then you got to put it all the way down in its bottom setting, and then you have to set the damp rate to stiff. Floor it, and off you go. Now, I did ask, is there any special mode or secret launch control? And they're like, no, you just floor it.
Just sport and low setting and stiff.
And off
stiff
you go.
Suspension. Yeah, and it was impressive. It beat the TRX easily. I mean,
Handily.
the TRX. So we've owned the TRX for 13 months. It's going on and more than a year, and we've drag raced the TRX, I don't know, dozens of times, and TRX has never lost.
Yeah, against
until the Rivian came.
Raptors and twin turbo, whatever,
supercharged
V8s and all of it.
Different modified vehicles, Mustangs.
The interesting thing, so our track is pretty short. It's probably by the time you hit the runway or the finish, somewhere around 1/8 of a mile.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is even at the end of the track, the TRX wasn't catching up. And typically when you see Tesla cars race, hypercars or whatever, Porsche 911 turbos, what ends up happening is the Tesla is quicker up to a point and then the gas car takes over. But when you're thinking about the truck world, I mean, the TRX has a speed limited top speed of 118.
Right.
And the Rivian has a speed limited top speed of 115. So maybe if the drag strip was 40 miles long, you could slowly creep up with a TRX, but over a quarter mile, I think even over a half, I just don't see a point where the TRX would go scooting by. Because even at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, the Rivian feels insanely quick.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with your initial launch, right? If you can get going fast, you're kind of winning the race almost immediately, right? And of course, the TRX is also all-wheel drive, right? It's got all the traction, and it's not as heavy. I can't believe I'm saying that. The TRX...
6,300
yeah,
or something?
ours is about 6,300 pounds.
700 pounds less.
Yeah, this is way, it's a little bit above 7,000, this one. So you're winning that race initially, and then you're just kind of pulling away a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think I would agree with you. If it was a quarter mile, I think the TRX would be close, but I don't think it would win.
Now, when you're looking at the different drivetrain modes, so there's kind of an all-purpose mode, which is all-wheel drive. There's a sport mode. There's a bunch of different off-road settings. And then there's also one called Conserve, which is interesting. This is the range mode. And what that does is it disconnects the rear motors altogether.
It becomes a front-wheel drive truck.
Yeah, front-wheel drive truck, which is super funky. And it'll just kind of pull itself along. But it makes sense because when you're cruising down the highway on a road trip at 65, 70 miles an hour, you don't need all four wheels.
You don't need power. You don't need 800 horsepower.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You put it in conserve mode and floor it, though, I mean, it's dramatically slower.
You can tell.
It's not the difference between all-purpose and sport, you can tell sport mode is punchier, but it's still very quick and all-purpose. But when you select conserve mode, it's definitely a little bit of a turtle effect.
Yeah, but still, I mean,
it's not dangerously slow.
You still have 350 horsepower.
Still out-accelerate like a Nissan Leaf, I'm sure.
Yes, so it's just a little bit slower. But it does change your range estimation. So, I've noticed this even driving it today to the off-road place and back from the off-road location that we're using at Ironclads. And the conserve mode actually adds quite a bit of range, at least on the trip meter. I noticed like between 2,000 to 208 miles of range to about 222. So it's significantly conserving energy using that conserve mode, which is, we'll have to test more, right?
Yep.
And see how that works.
And the range computer is based on your driving habits. So if you're a major
Your
lead foot,
recent driving habits.
yeah, if you've been doing launch after launch after launch uphill, it's going to be reading lower than somebody who's
Right.
just been cruising around steady state.
Exactly.
So it'll kind of adjust
Which makes sense.
based on the driving.
Which kind of makes sense. And a lot of other regular trucks do that too.
One thing I do like, which they've incorporated, and I've been playing around with this a lot with other OEMs. So I was just on like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 program, an all-electric Hyundai crossover, and I was in San Diego. I wanted to navigate to Colorado just to see what the trip planner would say, and it was like it just gave up. It was like there's a few stops here you could charge for several hours, whatever. But when you do that on the Rivian, it's networked with the different providers, and not every provider, but a lot of them.
Right.
And we'll actually tell you like, okay, you drive 150 miles, you stop here for 19 minutes. You go another 100 miles, you stop here for 12 minutes. So it knows exactly where to stop and for how long, so that you're not stuck sitting for hours on end.
But it's assuming you're leaving like with full charge,
Well, it
or
is
the current charge.
The current charge, yeah.
And then it's assuming at your location you'll be near zero.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And I think there might be ways you can adjust that. I need to kind of play around with it a little bit so you can maybe mess with the parameters. But it's good that they've thought of that and they're incorporating.
Like some others don't.
Yeah.
Like for example, I was recently in the VW ID4, and we did a towing test with that as well, with a trailer, a much smaller trailer. But the VW ID4 was not providing that information to me. I had to find my own chargers and figure out myself, right? Where do I need to stop and how long do I need to stop for? Rivian calculates that.
So when we look at also the fast charging capability, Rivian is, according to the website, building out the Adventure Network, right? Which is a nationwide network of DC fast chargers capable of adding 148 miles of range in 20 minutes to the R1T and R1S. We intend to build 3,500 plus DC fast chargers at approximately 600 sites by the end of 2023. So they're working hard to kind of expand their network and to build their own basically supercharger system. And they're saying that currently these are going to be exclusively for Rivian owners. And they're also working to build waypoints, which are level 2, kind of like destination chargers. 10,000 of those are planned by the end of 2023. And those might be at campsites. They might be kind of at like cool trailheads, that kind of thing.
Well, they said they had one in Moab, right?
Yeah.
Moab, Utah.
And 11.5 kilowatt capable, so more than the 9 that's at my house for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're kind of approaching it in a similar way Tesla did, but they're placing of some of the Adventure Network chargers are a little bit more off the beaten path, right? So the Tesla superchargers are usually in the big, interstate areas and major highways, and it sounds like Rivian wants to put them a little bit more closer to maybe national parks or stuff like that throughout the country.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're definitely going for more of the off-roady adventurous crowd.
Yeah.
So what did you think of your off-road snow testing today?
Yeah, so I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. I knew the Rivian would be good. I was expecting it to be good because of this precise four-wheel drive system, right? But other than that, I didn't know what was going to happen. So, very unique experience. First of all, we took it to the Ironclads Trail, which is in the Rocky Mountains here near Boulder, Colorado. And we left the office with about 100% charge. It was fully charged. Basically leaving Boulder at 100. And then we went up the mountain, about 30, 40 miles to the trail. And then Roman and I, so we were comparing the Tundra versus the Rivian because we wanted to have kind of a benchmark truck. The Tundra was going to be our benchmark.
Sure.
And so it was snowy, icy. So we found a snowbank and tried to go over it, and both got stuck.
Okay.
So first Roman got stuck in the Tundra, and he had to back off, and then kind of use momentum and get through it. And then I did the same thing. I went through slowly, got bogged down. By the way, I put it in off-road mode, and there are 4 different off-road modes there. There is the drift mode, there is a rally mode, there is a rock crawl mode, and kind of all-purpose off-road mode, so to speak. So I decided to go in rock crawl because I wanted the kind of maximum traction and also maximum suspension height, which is available in that mode as well. and the maximum height is over like 15 inches. It says on the screen, but it may actually be like a smidge over that, which is a huge number, dude. Like if you look at the TRX, if you look at the Ford Raptor right now, F-150 Raptor, they have between like 11 and 12, maybe 12 and a half inches of clearance, right? So 15 inches of clearance plus the flat belly, because there's nothing hanging down below this truck. There's no differentials, there's no transfer cases, there are no, big, huge, control arms hanging down. So I got bogged down and I applied, full throttle, accelerator pedal. I kind of mashed and I said, figure it out, truck. And there was no noise. So that was weird to me because, usually when you get stuck in a gasoline or diesel powered truck, you can hear the engine spool up and there's a lot of drama and the wheels are spinning and snow is flying. In this case, there was almost no drama. And I looked out the window and I saw my wheels spinning, but I was kind of hung up on this ice.
Yeah.
So I backed down, used a little bit of momentum and just went over it. So
you used the 7,000 pounds to your advantage, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very, very capable, and we can. Well, I don't want to explain the entire video, but I didn't really feel the weight of the truck until I started sliding down an icy slope.
Oh yeah, then you feel it pretty quickly.
Then you feel the weight of this truck. Otherwise, you don't feel it. In the highest setting at about 15 inches of ground clearance, you can kind of tell it's a little bit stiff.
Very stiff.
It becomes a little bit pokey.
And that's just kind of one of the drawbacks of independent suspension and air suspension, right? Especially with air suspension. When you jack the vehicle all the way up, there's just no down travel. So you end up with kind of this pogo ride. It's not as bad on the Rivian as I've experienced in other vehicles. So like the older Grand Cherokees with air suspension,
were very stiff.
Yeah, they were like rocks. This one is a little bit more supple than that. I will say that 15 inches, the claimed, is insane, right? That's just enormous ground clearance.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the full integration of the air suspension is quite as well done as the Land Rover system on the Defender. So Land Rover kind of was one of the pioneers of air suspension in the modern era, right? I mean, yeah, okay.
Well, the GM was there too.
Citroen had the hydropneumatics and stuff in like the 70s or 60s or 50s. And then, you did have like helper springs from General Motors, and there were certain manufacturers. But Land Rover really dove in headfirst with like the P38 Range Rover and then even the Range Rover Classics to some extent. And then since the 1990s, they've just been developing. And the newest system with the new Defender, where you have like the dual circuit idea per bag, was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And they're just a little bit more sorted. So like in the Rivian, I've noticed sometimes, especially at speeds of 5 to maybe 10, 15 miles an hour off-road, you do get some kind of uncomfortable clunks that end up coming out of the suspension. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did notice that
like
too.
There's like a little bit of looseness, especially as you...
because like you said, there is not much down travel.
Yeah. And that is kind of a little bit discouraging.
But I've noticed it in some other vehicles too.
Yeah, it's not just Rivian, but I think like the benchmark by far is Tesla. Or sorry, Land Rover.
Land Rover Defender.
From an off-road standpoint with their air suspension.
Recently, and this is not quite in the same ballpark as this, but I was really impressed with the new Grand Wagoneer air suspension.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Even when I took it off-road, the new Grand Wagoneer system is the latest air suspension they have.
They were explaining to me, too, that they use a system kind of similar to the KDSS system in Toyota, which is an interesting idea when it comes to articulation in the...
So it's kind of tied in.
Yeah.
The four wheels are tied to each other.
And I will say, like, the up and down travel on the suspension is insane, all the way down from 9 to 15. And it's pretty quick to go up and down. So certain modes won't let you get to certain levels, but it's pretty responsive when it comes to lifting and lowering. Yeah,
and also we talked about the stiff suspension versus soft. You can tell the difference between them on pavement. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, there's two different damping levels.
But taking the Rivian off-road, I spent some time in the highest suspension setting, and then I lowered it to 13.5.
Lowered it to 13 and a half.
Insane clearance, right?
Yeah, and that's much better.
And it's much better, much more comfortable. We were able to go over most obstacles with that. And you can watch the video on TFL Offroad channel. You can see it exactly how it performs and how it compares to the Tundra, the latest TRD off-road Toyota Tundra. So. Yeah.
I did a little bit of off-roading yesterday, too, when I went to the ranch, because we had to, it was quite a bit. I had to drive up a literal mountain to go get to these logs. And one of the things that struck me, which is very cool, is unlike any other vehicle in the off-road segment, there's just no low-hanging fruit. right? In a typical vehicle, you'll have differentials to get snagged up on, transfer cases, exhaust,
shock mounts,
brake lines, all of it, right? Drive shafts, they'll all be hanging out underneath there. But the Rivian, you've got a battery, you've got some aggressive shielding, you've got 4 wheels.
Remember, we asked them, the engineers, about the shielding on the battery, and they said it's a sandwiched multi-layer. There's multiple materials, right?
Materials, yeah.
There's steel, there's some carbon fiber, there's some aluminum. So they really made it. They called it, I think he used the word ballistic.
That
shielding,
word did come
into play. But he said,
play.
please do not fire weapons at it.
At this particular truck, they didn't want us to.
Yeah,
maybe in the future we can convince them we can roll it on its side and start going at it. But they were telling me a little bit about the durability testing they put them through, and like they got them high centered time and time again. They wanted to make sure you could put the full weight of the vehicle on the battery and still have it retain its structural rigidity, because of course the concern is you puncture a battery, you could start a fire, right? You could have a thermal runaway event. There's a lot of bad things that go on when you start.
And by the way, so the government safety ratings are not official yet.
Okay.
I don't think it's rated on NHTSA yet, but they're in the process of doing this, right? And they were mentioning a couple other things. So side protection is important, right? If somebody hits you on the side.
Yeah, they said the battery cage was so strong.
It was breaking some of the test equipment, right?
Yeah, they said that weren't getting any, like the body structure itself
wasn't bending.
The pillars weren't bending because the battery structure was resisting any impacts they were taking.
Yeah, and also they talked about the front tow hooks, which this truck does have, also being able to withstand a lot of pull strength, right? Way over 1 time the gross vehicle weight of the machine, of the truck itself, maybe even 1.5 times. So, yeah, it's got impressive kind of toughness built into it, as far as kind of the chassis and just how it handles.
So one thing I didn't like about it from an off-road standpoint, this, of course, does have the adventure package. So when it had the smallest wheel available. So
which is a 20.
20-inch, 21s, and 22s are available. The 20-inch is the smallest wheel you can get, and then it's wrapped in a Pirelli all-terrain tire, a Scorpion, which was cool, and then it's even an EV-specific Scorpion.
Yes.
So it's built to be relatively low rolling resistance.
And handle the heavy weight.
For an AT.
And also heavy torque, right?
Yeah. Now, I asked them, I said, look, 20 inches they look cool. It's better than a 22, but when I'm off-road, ideally I want like a 15-inch.
Or a 17 or an 18.
Yeah, in modern day society, you're not going to get a 15. So 17, 18 is kind of where I'm comfortable. And I've had, I think it's fair to say, pretty bad experiences with 20-inch wheels.
Yes.
Off-road.
I remember.
Involving a Land Rover. Because
Defender.
what happens is you have too much wheel and not enough sidewall, and you end
can
up...
pinch it.
Yeah, you get pinched. You get little pinch tears. And then you blow out the tire. And they were like... Well, there's nothing much we can do because the front brakes are enormous. Like, it's got these huge 6-piston front calipers. Yeah. So they were just limited on the wheel size they could do. I'd like to see, actually, like an off-road specific one with like an integrated winch in the front, vinyl floors, a little bit more stripped down with maybe a smaller wheel.
Bigger sidewall, yeah.
Yep, maybe shrink down the brakes, change the towing capacity, whatever you have to do, but like a nice chunky sidewall. I think that'd be really cool.
I would agree. Maybe, and of course, we'll get to some accessories later. I mean, you can put stuff over the bed, on the roof, right? We didn't even talk about the gear tunnel yet. But I think most people now are aware that it has a gear tunnel behind the cab.
Yeah, what Andre's talking about, we'll just go over it really quick. Because it's an electric vehicle, it doesn't have an engine in the front, so it's got a giant front trunk. Because it's an electric vehicle, it doesn't have stuff like drive shafts running through it or gas tanks. So in between the cab and the bed is this giant pass-through, which goes from the left to the right side of the vehicle.
Lockable.
And it's lockable, yeah. And it's got an electric tonneau cover, which I'm a little suspect on about the longevity, by the way. So let's talk about some of... I feel like we've really talked about a lot of the good stuff.
Yeah, we need to switch
What
gears.
are some things you didn't like after driving it around for a day or two?
Right. So first... I was going at about 50 miles an hour, 55, towards our off-road trail area, and it's quiet, right? The vehicle was quiet. Then I accelerated to about 60, and I noticed wind noise coming off of the mirrors. It seemed like side mirrors.
Did it seem to you like it's more passenger side? I wonder if it's like a window fitment issue, because I heard that as well at highway speeds.
And by the way, so the vehicle, you're not hearing engine noise. Mm-hmm. So you're more aware of other noises, right, that are around you. The tires were not very loud at all.
Tires are really quiet.
Yeah, the tires were quiet.
The motors are louder than I expected. Tesla motors are much quieter than these. These you get, it's not a bad thing, but you definitely hear like a little zzz when you accelerate hard.
But it's a good because I mean, you're getting feedback from it, right? You know you're stepping on it.
You're moving.
And you're getting some feedback from the machine, which is okay.
So, the wind noise, I don't know if that's specific to our truck, but that was a problem.
Maybe, because this is an early one.
Yep.
So the other thing I noticed, the build quality is generally great, but there's a couple of areas which are not so great. Like by the front seat, I noticed below it, some of the plastic wasn't fitting quite right. Inside the gear tunnel, there's a little area where you store the hose for the compressor. By the way, onboard compressor.
Onboard air.
Onboard air. That little door is not perfectly fitting.
Right, it doesn't fit right. It needs like another latch. Did you see that? So I tried to put the hose back. I spent a long time getting it perfect and flattening it down, but it's only latched on the one side and the plastic's a little flimsy.
Yeah.
So it kind of plops up on the edges.
So just little things like that. And then there was a big thing.
What's the big thing?
That appeared today. We're having kind of an ice storm, so it's been drizzling and freezing. So in order to clear the windshield, Case and I were in the truck too. We had to use the windshield washer, windshield washer nozzles.
Yep.
And they're not high enough. I don't know if you noticed. There's 3 of them across the windshield, and they're pointing a little bit low.
Oh.
So they're not getting as high as a normal vehicle would be. So I don't know if it was just a point, it was just a aiming problem with them, so they were a little bit low. Eventually, the wipers would kind of pick up some of that spray and move it around because we needed to defrost the windshield as fast as possible. So I noticed that. So I'll have to talk to Rivian about this.
Yeah, and there's a couple things I picked up on. It has a really bad wireless charger. Mm-hmm. And I think they're aware of it because Brian was kind of giving me some hints and tricks, but the wireless charger on my phone will not work with the case. And the engineer was saying...
And mine didn't either.
Yeah, he had the same issue. Now, it's not like I have some weird off-brand phone. It's an Apple iPhone 13 with a little inductive charging case on it, too.
Mine is not as inductive as yours, but mine didn't work either.
But mine was built for it. Yeah. It should work. So it doesn't work with the case. And he said, well, mine doesn't either. I have to take it out of the case. So I took it out of the case, and it's a big kind of fat...
It's on the center console.
Yeah, it's like a big fat square. And the idea is you can have 2 phones in it, right? But what I found is getting the exact location of the phone in this big empty void to get it to charge, I mean, it takes a few tries.
Because it moves around.
And then you accelerate and turn, and you got to do it all over again. It just flops all over, and then it's game over. Just not a very well integrated wireless charger. I'd like to see maybe a little cutout or a little kind of scallop so your phone is nice and secure in there.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is so quick anyways. You accidentally hit the throttle too fast, and your phone is already catawampus, and it doesn't work. So wireless charger is very bad. The little opener for the charge port, it does this really cool little dance. So you push these little 3 streaks on the fender plastics, and it pops out and then glides open. It looks very sci-fi.
Yeah.
When I went to the self-wash, one of those squirty ones, every time a little bit of water would touch it or a little bit of pressure from the gun, it would open up.
Because it's a pressure-sensitive
switch. It would go, open up. And it's
but you're I don't want to spray water into my charger.
Because it's right next to the wheel, too, right? So you're trying to clean the wheel, and it goes, and I know, I'm sure that someone's going to comment, well, it'd be fine to get that thing wet. It's built to get wet. But I don't particularly want to pressure spray my charge port.
Inside of your charge port.
Yeah, so then I have to, and then this is what's frustrating. It's all wet. And then, of course, my finger won't close it. So I have to go inside, close it manually. And then I'm cleaning by the wheel, and I forget it's there the second time, and it opens up again. So that's a little frustrating. And then there's a couple things which are odd. It doesn't have a trip computer.
Right.
And they said that there are certain functionalities which they're working on. They're going to over-the-air update later. But that seems like a pretty big thing to launch a vehicle without a trip computer. So he's like, if you want to keep track of your mileage, go to the screen. You can see your odometer. And I don't know why that is, but there's no trip computer.
So they have the last 15-minute energy usage, right?
Right.
So they have a little graph that shows you the last 15 minutes of your driving, if you're regenning, right? Regen braking.
But it doesn't tell you the miles you've driven.
Exactly.
You can't reset it on the start of a trip and then track the whole trip.
Right.
I mean, a trip computer is it's a very basic thing, huh?
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I would have to say, so the rest of the interface to the truck, so just the overall user experience, right, is a little bit unique. Actually, a lot unique. Because there's not a lot of knobs or physical buttons.
I mean, we're talking almost zero.
So the only physical buttons really are the window up and down regulators,
Yep.
right? The front seats have automatic adjustment, electric adjustment knobs, but that's about it.
Yep. There's no volume knob.
There's no volume knob.
Tune knob.
There's no climate control knob.
There's no defrost hard buttons.
No.
Yeah.
So it's all tied into the screen. And then on the buttons on the steering wheel, there's two of them. There's little rollers and also side-to-side buttons. They can do many, many functions depending on which user interface screen you're in.
Now, the left one is the volume knob, always, I think.
Okay.
For the most part.
Yeah,
Maybe
as
if you're
far as
in a
I could
special
tell.
menu. Yeah, but the volume knob on the steering wheel is good. And I think you bring up an interesting point, Andre, because the infotainment system generally is excellent. I think it's super easy to use. I think it's very intuitive. I like that there are shortcuts for the heated seats, for the climate control at the bottom of the screen. You can go between your phone connectivity, your radio stations, your navigation, all very easily. There's a couple of things that are just technology for the sake of technology, though, like having to go into a menu to adjust the air vents. Right, and Tesla Model 3 does this too, where there's no little lever to move the air vents around.
It's done automatically.
You have to drag it on the screen.
Yeah.
It's too much tech. Same thing with the mirror controls, right? You have to go into a sub-menu, engage the mirror controls, and then you use the steering wheel buttons for the mirror controls. I would much prefer a hard button.
Exactly. So stuff like that, you have to get used to. Maybe after a while, you can get used to it and you understand it. By the way, when you're towing, the right roller button and the switch on the steering wheel becomes your trailer brake controller.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yes. So we'll have to test that out tomorrow and see how
Is
that
there
works.
like an emergency override, like on a typical one?
Yeah. Because, no, there's not. It's on the steering wheel.
But can you like squeeze something to engage
Well,
the
you
trailer
roll
brakes?
it to engage it.
Does that adjust the gain or does that turn on the brakes?
I think it can actually enable trailer brakes. Yeah.
Very
so
weird.
They have a unique solution for a lot of these things. So it's not ideal usually. I found myself when kind of bouncing down the rough road, having a little bit of trouble adjusting the fan speed, right? Because it's digitally, you have to adjust it within the menu of the screen. I agree with you. It's pretty simple. I mean, intuitive, but still, I wish it would have a little bit more physical buttons.
I don't know if you felt this, Andre, but there is, especially in the instrument cluster, so not the main screen, but the screen in front of the steering wheel, which I like that they have, unlike the Model 3. It's nice to have it there. But there is a tremendous amount of Tesla influence, and if you caught up on some of it.
Well, there's the adaptive cruise control.
So the adaptive cruise control?
It draws the vehicles around you, right?
Exactly. And so yeah, in the middle of the screen is a little picture of your truck, and then you see all the vehicles around you, you see the lanes, and that is the main priority. Just like a Tesla. To engage the adaptive cruise control, pull down on the drive selector, just like a Tesla. To turn on the auto steer down a highway, or the steering assistant, double click, just like a Tesla. So lots and lots and lots of Tesla influence in that aspect. It has a version of Sentry mode, right, where you lock the vehicle and
it's a little Yeti that watches you.
Yeah, so rather than having the little red glowing orb, there's a little Yeti, but it will record the video around the vehicle.
Yeah, and it'll send you like a notification and stuff like that. They have phone as a key, all that stuff. You have a kind of a key card that you can use. There's a key fob that looks like a little carabiner and is a little carabiner. So they have a lot of cool features. The door handles that pop out.
Yeah,
right?
There's I think on the swing panels, there's a little bit too much tech there too, like the pop-out door handles. I've never really seen the need or felt the need for them. Maybe it gives you a little bit of aerodynamic advantage, but I just prefer handle. And the big one I really feel that on is the tailgate catch. So there's this little rubber pad integrated into the top of the bed.
Could you use
post.
it when it was frozen? Today?
Well, I didn't try it when it was. I'll have to try that when we're done with this. But like at the ranch, you push it, and 9 out of 10 times it'll automatically, engage the tailgate. But every now and then, like it gets a little confused what you're trying to do. Same thing with the tonneau. Same thing with the rubber pads for the gear release tunnel. I would just prefer like a mechanical handle. I know I can always get to my stuff that way, regardless of if something happens. So that's kind of just a personal preference.
And both of you and I noticed this. The doors, you kind of have to give them a good slam.
You got to slam those doors.
And I think it may be because the doors themselves are kind of light.
Yeah, but it's very like, the vehicle feels so premium. And then like
So
you
don't wanna
close the door gently
you
like
don't
you
wanna
would.
slam the door.
Yeah, but you really got to commit to closing.
And you know what other truck is like this is the F-150. Because the F-150 is all aluminum and the doors are kind of light. And I've noticed even on my truck, my F-150 hybrid, you have to actually give the door quite a push in order to latch it. And I think it has to do with the weight of the door itself.
And Brian, the engineer, the development guy, was telling me that all the swing panels on the vehicle, so anything that moves is aluminum. Hood, doors,
Makes sense.
tailgate, saves weight.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the vehicle is
Well, it's already 7,000 pounds.
7,000 pounds. But yeah, I
Yeah.
guess every ounce still counts.
So I would say the overall user experience is good. It could be a little bit better. I'm also a little bit weirded out by there's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. There is Alexa integration. So you could say, hey, Alexa, while you're inside your Rivian, and actually give it commands about the vehicle sometimes, or like navigation commands, or to call somebody using your phone, using Bluetooth. But I mean, they said their answer for Apple CarPlay not being there, basically, their answer was, hey, we can do it. Our interface is already good.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that may have to do with some corporate stuff as
Yeah,
well.
there could be some behind the scenes stuff as why it doesn't have it. I do think that it's a good system, but there are people that swear by Apple CarPlay. Like they love the Waze integration that you can do there, or the Google Maps or whatever. And yeah, Amazon Alexa is better than I was expecting though. Like if you got an account hooked up, you can. I was playing with it yesterday. Any song I could think of, I would even try to like slur my words a little bit, change the accent, and it would pick up on what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Very consistently.
And it answers like some commands about the truck, turning, whatever Spotify station, or also I think, you can increase volume, obviously, using your voice, or decrease volume, or, give other commands to the system, and it does understand you pretty well.
Yeah. No, I think that they really did a very good job with a cohesive package. If you think back to like some of the early Tesla attempts, like the early Model S's or the early Roadsters, they were very homemade. They felt
a
very
little
kit
garage
car-like.
bandy.
Yeah, unless you were really looking at some of like the trim pieces by like the seat you were saying, or
Yeah.
some of the panel fitment a little wonky. It feels like a very high class, well made automobile.
Yes, and for example, door gaps, hood gaps, all that is great.
Right.
I mean, just the tailgate. There's not like odd looking gap somewhere, and the headlights work really well. I could tell. There's just visibility is really good. So overall, and it doesn't feel big on the road.
No, it looks big when you park it next to like a Ranger or a Gladiator.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel that big.
It's got an interesting kind of footprint because it's very low, but very kind of wide in the hips. So it kind of flares out on the front and the rear fenders for those extra wide wheels. I mean, it's got a good stance going down the road, and you've got that full LED light signature in the front that continues across the whole front of the vehicle. In the back, same thing with the taillight. Really looks pretty phenomenal on the road. And then you can lower it down into the lowest setting when you park somewhere, and it looks badass.
Yeah, it looks slammed down, or it looks on its tippy toes when it's all the way up. So it changes the way it appears and the way it looks in a huge way, depending on the suspension setting, the height setting. And yeah, do you really need the power tonneau cover? I don't know. I don't think so. If I was ordering not a launch edition Rivian, I probably would not get a power tonneau.
That seems like something's going to get stuck in there and jam it up.
So I might get just a manual tonneau if I needed one. And then you could also get a camp kitchen or other accessories maybe for it. You can get, it has roof rails or roof attachment points where you can mount like a roof rack, for example. And it has also, oh, by the way, were you using a lot of the cleats yesterday when you were carrying logs?
Yeah, they were pretty good.
Is it good?
One thing, so the bed floor mounted tie downs are a little high, so they're a little far off the bed floor. And that means that like if you're tying down like a 4x8 sheet of plywood, right, you're going to have a nice thick stack of them in order
to tie it down.
Yeah, whereas some vehicles are much lower. So that's a little bit of a shame. But yeah, the bed side cleats are really, really good. And we were able to fit a 4x8 between the wheel wells. So like on a lot of mid-size trucks, you have to go over the wheel wells and do like some kind of janky tailgate thing. On this, they just go whoop right in between, which is really well thought out. One thing we noticed at the ranch, though, is just like the Honda Ridgeline or the Hyundai Santa Cruz, the spare tire, full-size spare, so props to Rivian on that, but it's underneath the bed.
Right.
So you have
the
to
bed floor.
you have to lift up on the bed floor to get to the spare.
So if you're carrying logs and you got a flat, you have to unload the logs.
Yeah, and they were saying, well, it's a packaging thing with the motors and the drivetrain. You can't have it underneath. But
Yes.
I think that could potentially be a big oversight, especially like with the 20-inch wheels. You're out on your big camping trip with your friends. You got all the stuff in the back. You hit a rock wrong. You get a puncture. You're going to have to take all of that stuff out of the bed to get to the spare tire.
Right.
And the jack to get back there.
It could happen.
And then a couple other things. Onboard power, right around 1,500 watts. So
Total,
two
yeah.
outlets in the bed. It's good. It's not great.
Right, and you can't currently charge like another vehicle with it. I mean, 1.5
Well,
kilowatts is not enough energy.
It's enough to, like, if you're tailgating, right, you could run like a fridge, you could run
little
a blender,
TV maybe.
Yeah, maybe a little TV. But like
Yeah.
for example, we tried to run like a skill saw off of it, and the skill saw was like, rah, 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 rah. I mean, it was not super happy. And now, granted, this is not like a contractor truck, but for any of the higher draw
Right.
stuff, whereas if we had your F-150 with 7,000,
We could weld with it.
yeah, well, we did.
Yeah,
we
we
literally
did.
welded
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
You could power your house off of it.
Yeah.
Now, their argument is like, well, to power your house, you need a transfer switch and you need to have your house wired up correctly. So I understand that argument, but at the same time, the F-150 is much more useful for running a lot of appliances or stuff at one time.
So I think in the end, as we're wrapping up this podcast, I think it's a great vehicle, first effort. The pricing on it almost seems just good because price of everything else has risen so much. It's blindingly fast. It's good in most conditions, off-road also. And yes, there are some, things we discussed that we didn't like, but I think overall it's a really solid first vehicle that you can use every day.
Yeah, I'm just amazed. I mean, it's clear to me, being in the industry, like we have friends, right? And then you talk to some friends in certain companies, and you're like, oh, where's so-and-so at? And they're like, oh, they're at Rivian. And you go to an entirely different company. Oh, where's so-and-so at? Oh, they're at Rivian. Mm-hmm. Like, it's clear that this company took some of the cream of the crop from some of
a lot of talent,
the major manufacturers, right? And
we're talking
really
about design, PR,
engineering,
yeah, everything.
All of it. I mean, it really, as a cohesive package, it is one of the most impressive vehicles on the road. It really just feels phenomenal. How is it going to be in the long run? I don't know. We're going to have to wait in the long run. The fact of the matter is there's tens of thousands of people that have their name on the list.
And they're not getting their trucks yet.
I think so far, currently, just about everybody that's taken delivery are Rivian employees, right? And they said, well, we didn't want to make the public have to go through any of the testing, right? We wanted to make sure that we deliver the first production trucks.
The final glitches or whatever.
Yeah, to work out the final little glitches. So, I mean, there's just an enormous wait time for some people well into 2023 to get their vehicle. But if you want an EV truck, I know
patience.
This is the first one on the market, but it is going to be darn hard to beat. It really is pretty darn phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, the Lightning needs to step up, and be a great truck.
Just from like a sheer wow factor. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you're going to top it. I mean, I know like this is a truck show and people care about the 11,000 pound towing and the payload numbers, and that's great. But like that like incredible look like your neighbor gets on your eyes when he sees a gear tunnel or the power opening front trunk or like the little Sentry guy, the little Yeti. I mean, it just like sparks the excitement among people, which is going to be really hard to beat.
And and Roman and I and even Nathan and I discussed this before. We were concerned that they unveiled this truck almost 3 years ago. Right, and we knew what it was going to look like, and now it's finally hitting the market just now. And we were worried that the styling that they unveiled 3 years ago would get dated, right? That it would not be as fresh as it was before. But still driving through town, even through Boulder, which sees many different vehicles, it turns heads still. Old, it doesn't matter how old the person is. There's some older people that came up to me asking about it. There's some young people that came up to me asking about it. Everybody's curious. They noticed this vehicle. So it still has that new factor, I think, that it will have for a while.
I don't think it shows particularly well in pictures, but you see it in person and you're just like, oh, what is that?
Yeah, what is this?
Looks like a UFO. Yeah, it's very, very cool. So I think the Rivian team should be very proud of what they've accomplished. But as I read in a recent newspaper, now comes the hard part. right?
What newspaper are you reading?
I was it was some editorial about the automotive world, and
Actual
they were talking
paper?
about Rivian.
No.
It may have been a digital newspaper,
Okay.
if you want to get technical.
Okay.
But they're right. I mean, now comes the hard part. They got to start building these with consistency,
With quality, yeah.
and that's going to be the real challenge. But if they can do that, there's going to be, there's a lot of cool stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know what you think in the comments below. Come back to TFL Offroad, our brand new TFL EV channel.
Yeah, TFL EV. That's
Yep.
right.
TFL Truck will have a lot more stuff, including charging, like you said, other experiences with this truck, towing, off-roading, and long trips.
We'll see you soon.